Welcome to our BAS Connect session on selecting new HR software, where I'll cover off some factors to consider to help make your journey a success. I'm Nancy Pierce, the HRS practice leader with BAS Business Solutions. And I'm just going to turn my webcam off now so you can focus on the slides a little bit better. So we have 4 factors that I'm going to be talking about here that affect your software selection process, including software delivery, such as on-premise, hosted, or SaaS, in-house or outsourced, and what do all those terms mean? What's the difference between them, and help you decide which is right for you? Your level of needs. Do you need specific functionality or broad functionality or a hybrid? And technology and demographics. How could the ever-changing technology and the changing demographics in your organization affect the decision? Starting with software delivery options, on-premise, hosted, or SaaS, and what's the difference between these? On-premise is software that's installed on your servers. Hosted is similar, but the software is installed in a hosted environment like Azure or BAS Cloud, or there's several options out there. SaaS, which is an acronym for software as a service, is software that's hosted by the publisher. And let's look at the pros and cons of each option. On-premise is the first one I'm going to start with, and that you could save on annual subscription fees if you already have servers and IT staff to manage them. But versus if you don't, you'd have additional server and IT costs. You may need to purchase new servers. If you use outsourced IT services, their annual fee may increase to absorb maintenance of the new servers. If you have employees in remote areas with unstable internet access, if it's installed on your servers and people have access to the server applications, they can continue working. But any web applications that you would be hosting from your servers, like self-service or time collection, of course, your employees would have trouble accessing that if their internet was unstable. You can control when your updates happen with on-premise installs. You can do testing if you have integrations or customizations, but the disadvantage to that is you must plan and apply those updates, and that might involve your IT and the vendors and associated costs. Sometimes it's easier to opt to select feature-rich applications for specific functionality with on-premise, but you may end up with a lot of products and databases to achieve a full scale of functionality. And data security is in your hands. That may factor into keeping your data in Canada. The downfall is data security is in your hands. So your IT must restrict internal and external access to the data. Firewalls and antiviruses need to be kept up to date, and they have to manage the backups. Looking at hosted and carrying on with the data security, backups, server updates, and hardware maintenance is in the hands of the organization that's hosting the applications for you. You must select a trusted host because they have to maintain those antivirus updates, etc. The cost of hosting is in addition to your software costs, whereas if you don't do hosting, you're just paying for your servers and your IT costs. So sometimes that can offset and reduce those costs and be advantageous. Most are single tenant, and that means that you'd be the only company accessing data on that server. But if it's multi-tenant, other tenants or other companies may be taxing the resources and affect your speed. Most hosted organizations do the server maintenance on off hours, but if the host is rebooting or taking down the server, that can cause disruption of service if it's done during the working hours. It's easier to scale up if needed. It's what they do. They can just add more resources or add more servers, but there again, you're going to be fully dependent on the internet. So the advantages and disadvantages are quite profound here. For SaaS, we have the pros and cons, and many of the hosted pros and cons apply here. So here's some new factors. You would have no local services required for that application. You're going to save on cost of server hardware and IT maintenance, but your subscription costs could be higher as the publisher is hosting the server. You would have easy access to the application from a web URL or often a phone app now, but remote areas with unstable internet access, of course, can lose that connection. The updates are managed by the publisher, usually at no cost, and are applied automatically. So no planning of upgrades or updates, but you have no control over when those updates are done regarding timing or what's being updated. I find it's a good option for an all-in-one if you have broad functionality needs. If you have specific functionality that's being met by another application, that application is not going to be installed on the same server. So you want to look for Open API, which allows for integrations if you have that situation. And another option or another concept here is that no customization per customer needs happens usually in the SaaS product. The software is designed to be shared by all companies. So if there's a new feature, it has to be advantageous to all the users. And is the cloud right for your organization? I've taken this list from a Sage document on the Buyer's Guide to Financial Management Software that can be applied to hosted or SaaS and of course to human resources. The first item, does the team need to work outside the office? We all know what's happened in the last 4 years, so we don't need to talk about that. There's been a drastic exodus from the office in some organizations. Does the solution offer a way to replace current paper-based processes? Often if someone is looking at their first HR software, they still rely on paper or Excel files. Would there be fillable forms, for example, accessible in the new solution? Does it offer an open API to support integration with your other systems if needed? And do your other systems allow for integration? Is something to think about. Do managers and employees want or need self-service access? And the advantages of that is you can give them real-time visibility to information that they need. You can push data entry tasks to the initiators, such as employee and onboarding forms, and they can access filing systems if it's applicable. The fifth point, does your organization struggle with inefficient processes? By making systems accessible to more people other than the central administrators, you can replace verbal, paper, or email-based processes. And finally, do you need to compete with bigger businesses on a smaller budget? A cloud-based system lets you tap into a world-class infrastructure. Your hosting or SaaS publisher amortizes the costs over thousands of customers, offering you a far higher level of performance, reliability, and security than you may be able to afford on your own. Let's look at the second item, in-house or outsourced. Historically, we've discussed in-house and outsourced when talking about payroll processing, but as the popular payroll service providers are adding HR solutions to their portfolio, this can now apply to HR and/or payroll. So the definition of in-house really is that payroll is fully managed and processed by the staff of an organization or by your organization. This would apply to all HR functions as well. Outsourced regarding payroll means that a payroll service provider is managing some of the tasks for you. Some parts of payroll are being managed by the in-house staff, like new hires, terminations, leave of absence, pay changes, all those employee-specific details. But the processing, remittances, and issuing of forms is managed by the vendor as a payroll service provider, and some common names for that would be ADP and Ceridian. Looking at the in-house pros and cons, in-house can be paired with any of the software delivery methods we reviewed earlier, but confirm if you're looking at a SaaS option if their payroll is in-house, because often it is an outsourced payroll. So you could save on annual fees. For example, payroll service providers may charge a base fee plus a per employee per pay fee, a per ROE, per T4, versus just having to pay your software fees for an on-premise or a SaaS option. It's sometimes more common that the staff of an organization be involved in the setup and the education of the application, and therefore you'd have more also control over the configuration and future changes. A lot of people do complain about an outsourced solution. They can't make changes. They have to go to the vendor. Now, associated costs for those setup and education may apply. And also, if you're going to be making configuration changes in the future, you have to have knowledge of how the application works and, of course, knowledge about HR or payroll rules. In-house is great if you trust your users and your system and your infrastructure. On the flip side, your user and your system reliability must be trustworthy. You can control responses to employees. If there's an error, an outsourced payroll provider may not respond immediately once it's reported, and that could damage your company's reputation with your staff. Ensure that you know service level agreements, and it's not always easy to get errors fixed, is what we hear from customers sometimes. When you have it in-house, you must know what went wrong. You must know your system well enough and how to fix it. But of course, BAS Help Desk or other help desks associated with the software can be a great help there. And controlling your expenditures is sometimes easier with in-house. Payroll service providers take a lump sum from your bank once the payroll is approved, and that includes the employee pays and the CRA remittances. They hold your money until they make those payments. Although this may just be a few days, a large part of the revenue stems from the interest they make on that money. The opposite side of that, though, if you have payroll in-house, you have to remember to make your remittances. Outsourced is a growing market. It's not just ADP and Ceridian anymore. And outsourced is usually SaaS. So all of the pros and cons of a SaaS solution apply here. A lot of people choose outsourced because it can ease the burden on your internal staff to know payroll rules. It's especially advantageous, let's say, if you have a small offshoot company that's in the US, or you've got Quebec or multi-province payroll. You might be non-compliant by accident if you're handling it yourself. But as I mentioned before, your staff still needs to be involved. Some people think we're just going to hand it over and they're going to do everything. Your staff still needs to be involved and is still responsible for checking reports and verifying that things are correct, because you could become non-compliant. They're not going to pay your fees. It's very rare, and it will be with a struggle. An outsourced will often have standard reporting and dashboards, but sometimes that leads to a lack of flexibility on reporting and access to your data. Some offer interim services. If your administrative staff, you've got a gap in staffing. There again, you would still have somebody going in to indicate the changes about your employees, and they might lack the expertise for your business. I find that a payroll and HR all-in-one is usually in an outsourced situation. So if you're really looking to just find an HR solution, you can't find that with the outsourced. They want your payroll. That's where they're making their money. Advantage is that the updates to configuration and rates are managed by the payroll service provider or the outsourced provider, but the onus is on your organization to provide any new rates that are specific to your organization, such as workers' compensation, and to confirm that they have applied those rates. Let's move on to now the level of needs. And do you have specific functionality or broad functionality or a hybrid? So let's talk about specific functionality. Is there a solution that's commonly used in your industry? If there is, review that to determine if it meets your budget and needs. If it's out of your budget, maybe you can focus on which of the areas are most complex. And for example, long-term care or group homes, it might be complex scheduling. Construction has its own requirements. If you have a current solution, are you going to replace that? If you are, write down what you like about it. What does it do for you well? What are the pain points? What are the things on the wish list that you want to be in a better solution? Are you keeping that current solution? It usually solves one thing. That's a focused solution. It might be time collection. We mentioned complex scheduling or in-depth recruiting, complex accruals. Things that are really unique about your organization are sometimes solved by those focused solutions. And will that integrate with other solutions? Because now you're shopping, let's say, for all of your other HR needs, which are non-specific. They're kind of broad needs. And in that case, you would have something covering your broad needs, but something covering your specific needs, which would be a hybrid solution. Talking about broad functionality, I've broken it down to light needs, medium, and high needs. If it's the first time that an HR system is being deployed in this company, you might try just downloading a plug-and-play system to see if it meets your needs. They usually bill monthly per employee count. You do the setup, or there's very minimal help from needed from the publisher. There's no contractual obligations often. You can drop it at any time. but you must fit within the box of that they offer. And it's usually literally tick boxes, and there's not very much flexibility with formulas and things. Are you open to adapting your processes or policies to what's being offered by the software configuration options? Sometimes it's that you have a low employee count, but that might not always mean that you have light needs. And then this concept is really applicable through all of them. Who's going to be managing the data in the HR solution? If you're expecting a busy payroll administrator to maintain other HR data now, keep it simple or choose an all-in-one HR payroll solution where it's one point of data entry and it applies to both. For the medium needs, sometimes it's because of a higher employee count, but not always. It's usually you need a little bit more flexibility in configuration. You don't fit into that simple out of the box. You're looking for something that's a little bit more robust. Your processes are in place, your policies are in place, and they can't be changed. And then high needs, sometimes a large organization, not always. It's more about complex needs, and maybe you need advanced automation or integrations that these other lighter applications don't offer. So looking at technology and demographics, let's look then at the technology changes over the last 35 years. Picked 35 years, it's past its 35th anniversary, so I went back to 1988 to see what did it look like then. And at that point, microcomputers, desktop computers, and were taking over from those large banks of macro computers, but they were fairly new to the workplace. DOS was predominant. Server networks were even fairly new to the workplace, depending on the size of your organization. And the internet was really not in the workplace at all, unless you're a university. 2023, we know that desktops and laptops are fully entrenched. People are really looking at more to mobile apps. Windows has been around for 30 years. Server networks are now, people are looking to more of a managed IT if they do keep servers on site, and not having to have their own technical staff. And of course, the internet is entrenched. And looking towards the future, more mobility, AI, artificial intelligence is just around the corner and is happening. Server networks, people are looking to have those things fully hosted. They don't want to have anything to do with servers anymore. And the internet is just getting faster and more accessible. So the software delivery methods kind of fall into that same kind of era. The on-premise were originally often starting to be developed in the 1980s. They were installed on your server. You have to have your own licensing for Windows and SQL. And if you do have customizations, they're sometimes expensive, and you can risk breaking them with the updates. Hosted, of course, very, very similar. It's just that it's on someone else's server. You have to connect to the host with their access method, and they may manage some licensing for you. But then SaaS is developed more recently when the internet is fully stable, very quick. It's developed for online access only. It's a single vendor for the application and the server. There's no licensing beyond the SaaS product. You don't have to worry about having SQL cows. They manage all of that. It's a fully web designed application is what it should be. And as I mentioned before, sometimes customizations may not be available in those options. No talk about HR would be complete unless I talk about the generations and how do they affect software selection. Think about the evolution of people over the last 35 years. Positive and negative changes in how people view life and work, and a lot of that is driven by technology. I love showing all the generations, but the takeaway here is that the 10-year-olds of today will be in the workplace in the next 10 years, and their view of technology is going to be unique. So how do these demographics and how does technology tie into you selecting software and making these decisions? Looking at the technology side, first of all, is the publisher in development or is their product stagnant? Are they just riding on something that they developed a couple of decades ago, or are they looking to make it fresher and newer? Your organization, is your organization being proactive or reactive when it comes to technology, as far as changing servers and going and upgrading your software and keeping up on those changes that are required? Does your organization have the funds and the knowledge to keep current? Can you pay someone in IT the wages to be that much on the cusp of what's changing. And as far as the generations, think of the demographics of the decision maker or the owner. And we don't want to pigeon anyone by age into a particular demographic or generational era. We know everyone is unique. But if someone is not tied into technology, does not know that it isn't that important to their organization, they might not buy into adding HR software to the organization, or going with something like SaaS, which is a newer concept. Think of the demographic of the users of the software. Maybe you have a payroll person that's been using the same application for the last 25 or 30 years. They're getting ready to retire. They're really not interested in making a change, or they're afraid of making those changes to something that is, say, web-based. And then most importantly, I believe, is the demographics of the workforce and the new hires. 10 years ago, when I'd be talking to people about HR software, I'd often hear them say, no, we don't need a self-service. Our employees are not computer savvy. They don't, have a way to get onto the internet. They certainly don't have phones or wouldn't want to use them for work. I'm not hearing that at all these days. It could be, of course, the demographics in the workplace is aging out and being replaced by the younger staff, but it's just a given now that everyone will have access to the internet, and often from their phones, which people don't mind using. But more in particular, the new hires, it is often the younger demographics. They want that experience of looking for that job, applying for the job, going through the recruiting process, and doing their onboarding on the web, and preferably on their phones. And that's the way they're going to view your organization and how it is to work there. If that is showing them that you're progressive, and they might not be interested in staying or being hired by your organization if that isn't to their needs. So now, how to prepare for your process. Know your organization. All these things that we've talked about, consider them all, and find out where your organization sits in this layout. Know your budget. Have approval from the decision maker before you get started. Nothing worse than going through the whole process, being happy with what you found, and you go to the decision maker and they say, I'm not giving you money for new HR software, and you've wasted your time. Know the range of the budget. Be careful of deep discounts that vendors might offer. They may just apply to the first year. Confirm the longevity of the pricing. Implementation costs may be waived to get a long-term gain from increased fees from a SaaS product, for example. When you're listing your requirements, get input and agreement from key users and other departments, managers, and employees. Start an Excel list of your must-haves, your nice-to-haves, and your don't-needs to keep you focused on your goals. Salespeople can be very persuasive and aggressive, and you may find that you've replaced your payroll system when all you really needed was some HR functionality, which caused more disruption and cost than your original intention. Have a grading process on your Excel list, Word list, whatever your favorite go-to is. So as you interview all the different options, you can say, do they meet our needs? Do they exceed our needs? And how do they rate against each other? Document your rules and requirements in detail if they can't be changed. For example, if you have time off plans or special calculations or processes, they may be unique to your business while you think they're standard. You can share those details and ask the vendor to prepare the presentation to show exactly your needs and not just an overview of what they think you need. Document how long it takes to do processes now for those areas that you expect to improve, and then you can identify an ROI, or return on investment. For example, let's say your highest priority is moving from paper-based timesheets to web timesheets with electronic approval and readiness for payroll. Factor in the time that the employees, managers, and administrators take now to do that process. Factor in the cost of any errors in your current process that you hope to remove. And finally, plan time for the process. Who is going to be part of the selection process in your organization? Allow time for meetings, emails, communications, and presentations, and deciding on your solution. Once you get started, you can keep moving through your process more successfully by having that planned out. So how can BAS help? We'd start with a discovery call where we uncover your needs and discuss the options that we have for you. If you're interested, we can provide a high-level budget of software and services costs that you can take back to your team and see if it fits. If it does, maybe you're interested in having, we could coordinate a personalized live presentation for your team. And if you decide on one of the options we have to offer, we then provide a proposal with a full statement of work. And then, which leads us to the BAS implementation methodology for your project, which would start with a project kickoff, requirements analysis, configuration, and education, all leading to a successful go live with project management throughout. That wraps up our presentation, and I do see that there's a question here. How long do HR projects take? Well, the answer really depends on your organization and the software solution that you select, as well as the number of components you're deploying. For example, the smaller project that's just HR and self-service may just take 6 weeks to 3 months, depending on how prepared your organization is with their requirements and the manpower to work on the project, and we always work at your pace. Full human capital management solution that includes HR, recruiting and onboarding, time and attendance, timesheets and/or clocks, learning management, performance reviews, and payroll, that would be done in phases in the priority that suits your organization and at the pace that works for your organization.